And it says I'm live. Okay, wow, this is excellent. Live and ready to go. All right, well, how's everybody doing? My name is Ned Dehan, and in the past I've come to you guys from West Virginia, but right now I'm actually in the Philippines. This episode is serving purely as a test run for a live stream format on BlackBoxOnlineRadio, and I am just going to kind of even play this back to myself at some point and see how things go. And I did one of these last year in 2022 because I wanted to see things. And this is not an accident, by the way. I'm just increasing the level of the microphone, so I want to know just how's the overall viewing experience. Maybe tilt this way so you can see both guitars, even something like that in the middle. Kind of a very odd effect this way, but I think that that's not even the true focus of everything. But yes, it's mostly just about getting some sound levels ready and everything, and I want to know what people are going to say in response. Hey, Russell Cook has joined on. Yes, Russell, this is a test live stream just so I can kind of see how it's going to sound and maybe possibly doing some more things like that in the future. Now, I don't mean to kind of throw you guys off with my appearance and everything, but it's just I am in the Philippines actually, and I don't know if you can see this, but there are some massive tan lines going on. Thanks to my mother's Irish heritage, I don't do too well in the sun, so I am also never wearing sleeves ever again in this country because it's extremely hot. There's actually a YouTuber out there named John Anthony who is somewhat of a terrible person, but he does a show from Brazil and he wears a tank top in almost every episode because he simply said that it is just a little bit more suitable for a country with that. Wrathchild is here. Hey, good morning to you too. And now that we have some people on, I want to share something with you guys. And that is that this was how I was imagining the new format of Black Box Online Radio, where I was going to say, and welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. And welcome to True Crime Talk Radio in the morning. Start your day with some things about the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, and many, many more. And that's kind of what I was imagining, but this is a new opportunity to test some things out. By the way, Russell and Wrathchild, how is everything sounding? Like, can you hear me all right? And are you able to notice any type of like gaps or anything? Because as I said, I tried this last year and it was more like I would be talking and then it would go like turning into Charlie Brown noises. So I want to begin with something for you guys about the Zodiac Killer, and that is that I'm going to be releasing a new series of interviews on. Oh, audio sounds good. I don't notice anything off. Excellent. I can't really thank you enough. I mean, hey, Richard Grinnell is here. I hope you're having a great time. Mostly, as I said, other than dealing with some of the sun damage or something and adapting to my extreme whiteness in the, tropics or subtropics. And Russell Cook says that it's sounding fine. Okay, great. And as I said, I was hoping to start with something about the Zodiac Killer and saying that there will be a new series of interviews available here on Black Box Online Radio. I have recorded the first one and I'm going to be releasing that on Monday for Zodiac Monday. Even though I'm looking at doing more live streams for the channel in the near future, I still want to keep up with Zodiac Monday, Ripper Wednesday, and the Anything Goes Friday segment. I'm also looking forward to adding in the segment about the audio books that I'm going to be putting out for Killer on a White Horse and Down the Dark Lane. I put them out on Amazon.com, and yeah, they've been out for a while, and some people bought the paperback versions, sure, whatever, but now it's time to just put them online for free, because that's overall the way that I like to put content out there. Wrathchild says, your interviews are really good. I hope you guys will like the one that's going to be coming out on Monday, and I'm also going to be contacting people and asking them to be guests on the show, and unlike the interview with the expert series from the Zodiac Killer channel, which I hosted, this is going to be an open free-for-all. They don't have to be experts, or they don't have to be people who have books or podcasts out there, just people who closely follow the mystery that you guys might know. They are welcome to come on the show as well to talk about their Zodiac Killer observations, to talk about their Zodiac Killer suspects, because the Zodiac Killer was a serial killer, and it's an unsolved case and an unsolved mystery, and someone doesn't necessarily have to be an expert to make observations. That's why I started making podcasts about the Zodiac Killer in the first place, because I learned about the suspects. And in 2017, I made 6 episodes about the Zodiac Killer, and I looked at 3 particular suspects: William Joseph Grant, Richard Gaikowski and Louis Myers, because I had things to say about them. I made some observations that you didn't necessarily need to be an expert to make the observations about. For example, Louis Myers was brought forward as a Zodiac Killer suspect by his friend Randy Kenny, and he was 17 years old at the time of the Zodiac crimes in 1968 and 69. And the challenge question was, some people thought that the Zodiac Killer might have had a voice that sounded as old as 30. Brian Hartnell, the surviving victim from Lake Berryessa, said something very similar to that, that the Zodiac Killer had a voice between 20 and 30. And then they're just asking the question, is it possible for the voice of a 17-year-old to be mistaken for the voice of a 30-year-old? And I was like, well, absolutely, that's true. I've known people who have voices that are similar to that. I knew people back in high school that had a very older sounding voice. Yes, of course, the voice of a 17-year-old can be mistaken for the voice of a 30-year-old. And that's just a very, very simple, mundane example. But that just goes to show you that it's not only about, putting out a book and like you have a published book about the Zodiac Killer, therefore you can now go do interviews. And I'm hoping that this new interview series is going to explore some things in a different way. Now, I'm in the Philippines, guys, so let me know as well if you hear anything in the background. The last time I was in the Philippines, we heard lots of chickens and barking dogs and motorbikes, and I was actually a guest on the Citizen Detective podcast with Mike Morford as well as his other co-hosts, and there were just all kinds of interruptions. Not only the chickens, some people started having a party halfway through, and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to have to go sign off right now. I'm not really joining the party. That's not my scene. Instead, it's just there was a little bit too much noise going on. And this is another thing that I've been hesitant about, with live streams in the Philippines. And the noise last time really did interrupt a lot of my plans with Black Box Online Radio, because I did an episode about the psychological profile of David Berkowitz, the son of Sam shooter. And I was looking forward to doing a very large deep dive into the son of Sam case. And Manny Grossman even responded to my episode on the son of Sam last spring, and he gave some good feedback, as Manny does. Manny Grossman has done one of the biggest deep dives into the Son of Sam story, and not only that, but also looking at the work of Maury Terry, the author of The Ultimate Evil, and was Maury Terry telling the truth or not? And you guys know where Manny Grossman stands on all of that. But I had several different episodes planned out, but then I decided that I just wasn't ready in terms of audio quality. I didn't want to do a giant deep dive into the Son of Sam case and have a bunch of chickens going on in the background and so on, and barking dogs. Although, I mean, the spirit that was trapped inside of Harvey the dog, I guess, made his way to the Philippines and interrupted that one episode. But when it comes to the Son of Sam, there's still things that I want to go through. There are books that I want to read. And there is analysis about David Berkowitz as the Son of Sam shooter, because not everyone is convinced, even to this day, that David Berkowitz acted alone. And there are a couple of different camps that people have. Number one, they believe that there was some type of group murder theory, some type of multiple killers theory, where there is this type of conspiracy and only one person was vilified. And then there are the people who go to an even greater extent, an even more extreme extent, and think that there's this nationwide cult that's going on, and it's all connected through different organizations like the 22 Disciples of Hell and the Process Church of the Final Judgment. And then you're having this link between the Son of Sam and the Manson family. And I will always listen to people. I will always listen to people unless I believe that they are genuinely fraudulent. If I think that someone is being honest and they're genuinely sharing their ideas in a truthful and honest way, I'm going to talk about their stuff. I'm going to talk about their material. And also, I also began to notice that there was this lacking element of that in the true crime world, where these are just people who are putting out theories and observations, and these are people who are just denying them. But where's the in between? Where's the person? Where are the people who are just saying, let's evaluate the information, let's analyze somebody else's theory, let's look at the points for and points against. Does this make sense to you? And again, you don't have to be the biggest true crime expert in the world to look at something like that. And I also want to share some things with you guys. As you know, that every Wednesday is Ripper Wednesday here on Black Box Online Radio, and I talk about Jack the Ripper, and I always have to go back to the Zodiac Killer mystery, because Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer are just so similar in the way that they interacted. And with Ripper Wednesday, I'm actually somewhat pleasantly surprised about how that segment has turned out for BBOR, even though I am forced to admit that it's not the most popular show in the world. It's not really taking YouTube by storm, but a lot of people are starting to tune in with their observations about Jack the Ripper, and they're giving me feedback and criticism, and they're saying a bunch of things that I think are very valuable that I can discuss on the program. But a big difference between Ripper Wednesday and Zodiac Monday is there are a lot of films that have been made about Jack the Ripper. There are countless movies that have been made about the Ripper, and I've gone through several of them. A Study in Terror, which is a Sherlock Holmes story involving Jack the Ripper. There's Jack the Ripper from 1959, The Lodger from 1927, and they also made a remake of The Lodger. And those are some films that I've discussed on Ripper Wednesday. And I've also incorporated a lot of poetry into the Ripper Wednesday segment because some of the Jack the Ripper suspects were poets: Lewis Carroll, Francis Thompson, and there was even a new one that I had just discovered, and that gets incorporated into the show as well. So there's very, very different pieces of media and different takes on the subject because, again, you don't have to necessarily be a criminologist to make observations about the Ripper case. And those are some things that I'm looking forward to continuing onward with the story of the Ripper. And I would like to do interviews with other people, with Ripperologists, with people who have ideas to say about Jack the Ripper. And I think that there's going to need to be a particular type of balance for the channel because I want to interview people. I want to hear different ideas. And I also think that sometimes it'll be just me in front of the camera like this, talking to you guys, giving my follow-up notes. Okay, this is the ultimate set of feedback, uninterrupted, no time limits, and so on. But right now, to you guys who are following along with this live stream, are there any other true crime cases that you're curious about? Are there any other stories that you would like covered on Black Box Online Radio? Do you believe that there is something particularly missing from a true crime discussion? And remember, I do the Anything Goes Friday segment, where any subject is fair game. You're welcome to also propose things that are outside of the true crime world. I mean, I mostly focus on true crime and serial killers, and I was even tempted to add a new segment. Like last Tuesday, I did a true crime talk radio segment, which is kind of like this one. But I was tempted to add a new segment where I was going to be talking about the just a whole day devoted to serial killers. Serial Killer Tuesday, done in this format here in the live stream format. But it's I'm still kind of debating on doing that one because I want to again make sure that I'm not just putting out material that I'm not proud of. I want to really see if I'm doing something in somewhat of a noteworthy and way in which I'm proud of. And Julian is in the comment section who says, "Woohoo, this is going to be a good morning now." Hey, much appreciated. Thank you so much. And that's how I was hoping to do the show. I wanted to say, start your day with some true crime talk radio, because again, it's somewhat lacking from the media circles. But with Serial Killer Tuesday, I found that when I looked at American serial killers from the second half of the 20th century, from 1968 and onward, almost always there's a type of Zodiac Killer connection. And we have a comment here that's coming in from Richard Grinnell, who says, "I can't remember, Ned, but did you cover Jack the Stripper?" No, I haven't actually done an episode on Jack the Stripper, but it was requested also from somebody who was a supporter of BuyMeACoffee.com, not directly, but they said, "Hey, Ned, don't forget to talk about Jack the Stripper," which a different set of crimes from the 20th century. Jack the Ripper, of course, would have been in the 19th century. Yeah, I'd love to do something like that. And people, come on, share any other types of possible suggestions or ideas for future episodes. I would love to know what you guys think about all of these things. But yeah, with these serial killer stories from the second half of the 20th century in the United States of America, almost always it turns into a Zodiac Killer connection. Are people not just mind blown by this? Are they not mind blown by the amount of connections that people are making to the Zodiac Killer case? Anytime there's another serial killer, they have to connect it to the Zodiac. And it's almost done in somewhat of a bizarre fashion because, of course, you have the Unabomber and the Zodiac connection. Well, there's some reasons why people think that the Unabomber was the Zodiac, living in a similar area. Also, similar handwriting between Ted Kaczynski and the Zodiac. Ted Kaczynski did live in the Bay Area, and he had connections to the Bay Area, and the whole theory about how he spent the summer, parts of the summer of 1969 in Canada, looking at a place where he was trying to buy a piece of land, actually, and then comes down south to the Bay Area and then goes back over to the Midwest, and that explains the infrequency in Zodiac activity. Okay, people have ideas about that, but then it just turns into other things, like John Cameron trying to say that the Zodiac Killer murdered 660 people, and then it's just like, boom, and then it just turns into this massive, massive, massive overhaul of intertwined, interconnected, messed up true crime ramblings, because John Cameron does indeed do that. He's the guy who has Edward Wayne Edwards as a Zodiac Killer suspect, and what he claims is that the Zodiac murdered 660 people, that Edward Wayne Edwards murdered 10 people a year for 66 years, an average of 10 people a year for 66 years. So he committed 660 murders. And it goes into the Peterson murder in the 2000s, as well as the murder of Teresa Hallback, who becomes the subject of Making a Murderer. And I've done several episodes on Making a Murderer, and Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey, the people who were convicted for the murder of Teresa Hallback. And I would be open to exploring that in the near future, getting back into that particular story. But it really is quite saddening, because there is a certain amount of time that is running out, because Stephen Avery is getting older every day, and he has been in jail for a very large portion of his adult life for the murder of Teresa Hallback, as well as for another attack that took place in the 1980s, which he was wrongfully convicted for, and then he is set out for about 2 years, and then goes back to jail for the murder of Teresa Hallback. And his nephew, Brendan Dassey, was also convicted for the murder of Teresa Hallback, and I absolutely do not believe that Brendan Dassey was guilty. I don't think that he had anything to do with the murder. I don't even think he understood what was going on, and yet he is still in jail for something which I don't think he committed. And there's a very large movement on social media, the internet. You'll see the hashtags Free Brendan Dassey, and a lot of people are trying to keep that story alive. And if there's anything else that I can do with Black Box Online Radio, I would love to do that. But in the true crime world, there are different types of stories. We have, the serial killer stories that I mostly talk about on BBOR, looking at the different serial killer theories, serial killer psychology, what drives people to kill. But then there are other stories out there involving scams, involving frauds, and I've only gotten into that world a little bit. But believe it or not, back in 2011, that was my core focus. I just wanted to learn as much as I could about these particular types of operations, and it was a career ambition that I had for a while. I was actually hoping to start something called the Internet Security Educational Foundation, and I mean, I know that it sounds like a little bit far out and outrageous for somebody to just come up with their own foundation right out of college when I was 23 years old. But I began exploring cybercrime and scamming, and that became a big focus. For about 2 years, I was heavily involved with that, and some events happened in life, and I didn't end up going down that pathway. But have done several episodes on Black Box Online Radio that have revisited those types of subjects. But there's one avenue that I've never talked about before on BBOR, and it relates to these dating coach scams that are on the internet now, where people charge an enormous amount of money for dating advice, like $1,000, $1,500 an hour, $1,800 an hour. And I'm very curious to evaluate some of them and find out who is telling the truth and who is not. And I can ask you guys very clearly, what do you think about that? What do you think about that material? What do you think about those subjects? The episode that I have in mind is the ugly truth about dating coach scams, and that would be something for the Anything Goes Friday segment, where I would just share what I genuinely think about some of these people. Is this person telling the truth? Is this person not? And over the past year, I've also incorporated some things from the manosphere into Black Box Online Radio, very, very loosely, very, very briefly. And they are, for example, talking about Jake Davison, who was the Plymouth shooter in the United Kingdom, and he was perhaps part of the black pill ideological movement online. I don't even want to associate that mass murderer with anybody out there, because there are people who are in that movement who just want nothing to do with him. And then, of course, there was a comment actually that came in last week on the Zodiac Monday. I guess that's technically this week. On Zodiac Monday, someone said, "I'm glad you highlighted some things about the red pill ideology and about how it can be toxic." But I view everybody as a case by case presenter, a case by case content creator. Some people are going to make good observations, and some people are going to make so-so observations, and other people are going to be flat out crazy, and they're just going to be saying things that make absolutely no sense. And this is where commentary comes into play. This is what commentary is all about. We talk about different ideas that we're curious about, and we explore different ideas. And sometimes you want to challenge somebody instead of and say, hey, wait, what you're saying makes absolutely no sense. But as far as talking about anything red pill, I wouldn't even go that far as to say I did that in the most recent Zodiac Monday, because I pulled out 3 statements that have been made about human behavior. And I thought that, well, I'm somebody who talks about true crime on Black Box Online Radio, particularly about serial killers. And from my type of lens, my type of filter, the way that I'm looking at the situation, I thought that they were pretty far out statements. One of the people that I was even quoting was an individual named Julian Blanc, who was, I mean, as I understand, he's not connected to the Red Pill movement. In the past, he identified as a pickup artist, but he doesn't even do that anymore because he was involved in a particular type of scandal several years ago where he became the most hated man in the world. That's how the media called him. And a lot of it seems like it was things that were distorted. For example, on his Twitter page, he posted a domestic violence poster and said, might as well be a playbook. And this guy's like a dating coach and a pickup coach. And then people are just like, what? Domestic violence poster? And you're posting that? And obviously that was a joke, or like, as he, by his own admission, a horrible attempt at humor. And I mean, those people thought that he was serious about that, and that's just one example of many. And he did do some things that crossed the line, but I mean, I don't even think that he would be connected to any particular ideological movement right now. Now, getting back to some of the true crime cases that we can talk about here on Black Box Online Radio, I've definitely noticed that this channel seems to have a certain connection to unsolved mysteries. And one story that has been requested by you guys very frequently is the story of the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, the Cleveland Torso murders, and I would like to do something about that in the near future. Also, there have been a few requests over the years to hear something about the Tylenol killings, and maybe there's even going to be some interlocking networks of serial killer activity in that story. So I think that the unsolved mysteries are a little bit a bigger hit with you guys, but I'm also very curious about the solved cases. Like, as I said, what drives somebody to become a serial killer? Not only a murderer, but also go on to live in the shadows, committing these types of murders, and then have a return to normalcy, to return to their normal life, just walking along in their day to, hi, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Did you see that football game last night? That was really good. The guy like caught the ball in the end zone and he scored a touchdown, and then they're going out into the dark of night and they're just murdering people, and it really turns into something that Dennis Rader talked about with cubing, like having 12 different sides of his personality. And I think that that would be something. Oh, we have another comment from Richard Grinnell. Another intriguing case is the ghost ship of Mary Celeste. Richard, I think that it's really, really interesting that you would bring that up, because I was just reading about the Mary Celeste last night. The Mary Celeste and the Orang Medan, and both of these have some. Though both of these have some very peculiar theories, because with the Mary Celeste, is this the one where the ship was just completely abandoned, and they found like a floating ship that had absolutely no traces of anybody on there? I was reading about both of these stories at once, and I think that was the Mary Celeste. And the theory is that there was like some type of explosion of some flammable substance, and that everybody just jumped ship and abandoned ship because they thought that the ship was just going to catch on fire. But this is going to sound a little bit weird. When I was a kid, I would play with my grandmother's hairspray, and I would spray hairspray all over the floor. I don't know who told me to do this. I definitely didn't figure it out on my own. And I would strike a match, and I would set the bathroom floor on fire frequently. Please don't get into any of that McDonald triad serial killer stuff. I've never killed anybody. No, I don't think that. I also did not wet the bed either that much. No, I'm joking. I didn't wet the bed either. But I would set the bathroom floor on fire, and there can be these types of superficial flames that don't actually burn anything. They just kind of like get absorbed into the atmosphere. And there's this theory with the Mary Celeste that that's what happened. Now, I don't know that. It's still an unsolved case, an unsolved mystery, and it could be something completely different. I mean, maybe they saw some titty bar in Tahiti or something. They're like, some ship definitely gonna go that way. But there's also the story of the Orang Medan, which is a little bit different because there was the Orang Medan is the ship that had the distress call, and then by the time they were able to get aboard the ship, everybody was just dead, and they had these looks of terror and horror on their faces. And then they tried to tow the ship, the Orang Medan, and the ship burst into flames and sank, taking all of the secrets to a watery grave with it. Very bizarre things that happen at sea. Now, the theory that I was reading about most recently with the Orang Medan is that it is a little bit similar, that there could have been an explosion of nitroglycerin that will cause the ship to sink, but also that the ship might have been transporting some type of chemical that was and the chemical spilled and the vapors got around and they poisoned all of the crew. And sometimes we can find theories like that that make a little bit of sense. But you guys know, you people know who follow true crime cases, just because something makes sense does not mean it's what actually happened. Absolutely not. And I think that this is what a lot of people deal with when they're examining things like the Zodiac Killer mystery or Jack the Ripper. They want to put the ideas in a logical sequence. What makes sense to them? How does this idea fit in their brain? But that has no relevance whatsoever to the true crime world. The true crime world is about what actually happened. Why? Why am I saying this? Because human beings are not logical individuals. We are emotional individuals. We don't always make logical decisions for good reasons. For example, somebody once gave me this, by somebody, I mean, it was something that I read back in college about 16 years ago, so excuse me if I misstate any of the details. And it was that logic is like, you have food, and I have no food. So I kill you, and I take your food, and now I have the food. That's logical. That's what logic is. It's about pluses and minuses. There's a reason why we as human beings don't want to live that way because, well, we would just be killing other people for sandwiches. Make mine a Big Mac. But I digress from that point. So just because people can arrange these serial killer theories into a logical sequence doesn't mean that that's what actually happened. For example, when I started out looking into the Zodiac Killer case, I came up with this idea that, oh, well, actually, we have a question here from Lisa Faulkner. What's the time difference from West Virginia to the Philippines? 12 hours. It's 7:13 a.m. in West Virginia, right? 7:19 a.m. in West Virginia right now. It's 7:19 p.m. here in the Philippines. That is one of the most amazing things about this country, where I can just kind of jump right in to the time zones and I never have to check my phone or anything. But I actually have a double clock on my phone. I don't know if you can see that. It tells me the time on the East Coast and the local time, even though it's the same. It's 7:19 on the East Coast, right? But like, I came up with this theory about the Zodiac Killer. Like, all right, I think I know what happened with the Zodiac Killer mystery. There are all these differences in the crime scenes: the Lake Berryessa stabbing. Why did I say that first? The Lake Herman Road murders, the Blue Rock Springs shooting, the Lake Berryessa stabbing, and the Stein murder. I know what happened. This was a group of people. There were 5 men sitting in somebody's basement. Yes, it has to be a basement. Basement in California, not too common, but it has to be a basement. And they're sitting around a poker table, and they're playing cards and drinking beer. And what did they do? One person said, "This is how we're going to think of a serial killer story that will never be solved. A serial killer mystery that nobody can crack." And that each person committed one of the murders. Like, firstly, there's the letter writer. There's one letter writer, and he is just trying to be the central planning mind. One person committed the Lake Herman Road murders, one person committed the Blue Rock Springs shooting, one person committed the Lake Berryessa stabbing, and one person committed the Stein murder. And the ambition was just to commit a murder. You don't even have to make it look like the same person. Make it look different because it will confuse people. Yeah, that's what I thought. Is that my theory now? No, absolutely not. Well, why not? Because as somebody who has spent, well, some time looking into the Zodiac Killer mystery afterwards, the facts don't support it. The facts don't support any type of theory like that, that there's this type of thrill kill club at the poker table in a basement. Oh, we have a comment coming in from Julian who says, "Hey, Ned, I remember in your suspect rating video, you gave Officer Richard Hoffman an 8 out of 10. Do you still like him as a suspect?" No. Yes, no, maybe so. I think that Officer Richard Hoffman is a reasonable suspect for the Blue Rock Springs shooting, for the murder of Darlene Ferrin on July 4th of 1969. Why? Because of his vicinity to the crime scene. Because he somehow made it into Robert Graysmith's book saying that he attended Darlene Ferrin's painting party. And I'm going to be very honest with you guys. Julia, you asked a good question. I was influenced by the book The Myth of the Zodiac Killer. You guys know I used to talk about the hoax theory a lot. The Myth of the Zodiac Killer is written by Thomas Henry Horan. He was the subject of the Peacock documentary, which came out earlier this year. And he even asked the question to the readers in the book, was Richard Hoffman the shooter at Blue Rock Springs? I mean, he's patrolling the area prior to the shooting. And this evolves into what is called, again, the policeman thrill kill club theory. But I said very clearly that I'm not gung-ho for any type of thrill kill club theory in the Zodiac Killer mystery, but that's what I was thinking, that someone who could have done that. And also I said an influence from the Myth of the Zodiac Killer. What would that be? The idea that somebody's informants were murdered, that there could have been either a drug deal set up or some type of illegal criminal activity set up, and the person who was being set up figured out. And who would have been the criminal informant in that scenario? Darlene Ferrin. That she's bringing Mike Michaud along, but she didn't know that it was going to turn into a shooting. It was a sting operation that backfired. It was a setup that backfired, and it ultimately ended in her life and the death of Mike Michaud. But no, I don't really entertain that as highly now. I have always said, though, if there is some type of amazing revelation in the Zodiac Killer mystery, I will accept the result. I mean, if the FBI signs off on the subject and says, oh, yeah, by the way, it was a policeman thrill kill club and Officer Richard Hoffman committed the Blue Rock Springs shooting, I'll be like, well, okay. I accept that. I'm not going to jump into some type of bizarre conspiracy theory unless I'm immediately forced to do so. But no, I don't really think I would put Richard Hoffman that high for anything other than the Blue Rock Springs shooting. Maybe even drop him down to about a 6 out of 10 on the as the Blue Rock Springs shooter, because other than that, there aren't a whole lot of reasons why you could connect him to the other crimes. Maybe there was a particular line in the 340 cipher that can be morphed into Richard Hoffman. And like some people thought it was Richard M. Nixon, and Nixon is misspelled, but it actually can be spelled out as Hoffman. Things like that, though, which as of now in 2023, I don't think too highly of that. And Nowbody has written in saying, I'm really hyped to hear what you're going to talk about and why you think they won't say what else is written on the car door. Oh, yes. Somebody had just brought that to my attention, that the car door at Lake Berryessa was actually photographed from different angles, and everybody zones in on a message that was written by the Zodiac Killer on September 27th of 1969 that lists the Zodiac symbol, the dates of Zodiac, the Zodiac symbol, the word Vallejo, and the dates of Zodiac activity, and then wrote by knife. And then the car door was actually taken off at the impounding, during the impounding, and other messages were written on the car door, or there's other inkings, other pieces of ink are on Brian Hartnell's car at Lake Berryessa. And I saw one of them and I couldn't even make out what it was saying. And buddy, that was you who sent that. And I tagged you in Facebook on that. And I did see that. I couldn't make out what was written, but there is some type of ink that is on Brian Hartnell's car door. And why aren't more people talking about that? I don't know. What did these messages say? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but why won't they say what else was written on the car? It's something that we're going to have to explore. But there's another comment that came in from Wrathchild that says, a solved case I'd like to hear more about is Dean Coral the Candyman. And yes, I'd like to talk about Dean Coral, because I was reminded of Dean Coral when I was doing the episode most recently for the Tuesday show on the Bayou Strangler, who was a serial killer from Louisiana named Ronald Dominique. And Dean Coral was also a very vicious serial killer, homosexual serial killer. Ronald Dominique, the Bayou Strangler, was a serial killer, homosexual serial killer. And looking at the particular types of parallels, because there is this element of viciousness in these actions that are committed by people like Dean Coral and Ronald Dominique that perhaps the media would not want to explore. Because when I was watching the documentary Bayou Blue about the serial killer Ronald Dominique, the Bayou Strangler, they proposed that maybe the media doesn't want to talk about these cases because they're just too gruesome and they're just too horrific, and the general public can't even wrap their minds around it. The general public can also not remember all of the names of the victims. Ronald Dominique murdered at least 23 people. I can't tell you the names of all of his victims, and it becomes a little bit too complicated for people to digest, but I've never done a standalone episode about Dean Corll the Candyman. So Wrathchild, I thank you for that comment there. Maybe I can work that into the Anything Goes Friday segment, or if I do launch the Serial Killer Tuesday segment, that could be also something that I would explore. And by the way, I just need to ask something though. Like, how do you guys feel about starting your day with some true crime talk radio? Was I completely far out for something like that and saying just, start your day with true crime talk radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe? Yes, I'm on an island here in the Philippines, but always a West Virginian at heart. I spent more time in West Virginia than any other part of the world. And BF Golf is here, and BF Golf says, "Hey Ned, hey BF Golf, how you doing?" But I would like to get back to something from the Zodiac Killer mystery, because we have a comment again from E Now Buddy who says, "I think it says Paradise Slaves on the fin. Do you mean on the car door at Lake Berryessa? That's what you think these other ink marks are? It actually says Paradise Slaves." And on the fin, do you mean like on the end or on the fender? But that would be completely appropriate for the Zodiac Killer to write a message like that on the car door at Lake Berryessa, Paradise Slaves, because that goes on to become one of the most famous things about the Zodiac Killer. Like, the Zodiac is so well known for by rope, by knife, by gun, by fire, slaves, paradise. Paradise, Paridice. Paradise is misspelled. Now, why is that? Anybody in the chat want to take a stab at it? Anybody in the chat want to take a guess? Shouldn't have said that. And if you were to ask Drew Beeson, author of Citing It on the Zodiac Killer and the host of the Zodcast, he would say it's because his suspect, Donald Lee Cheney, yes, a surname, BF Golf, is Donald Lee Cheney had a relative with a surname, Paradise, Mary Martha Ingersoll Paradise. I hope I got that right, because at first I thought her name was just Mary Martha Paradise, but Mary Martha Ingersoll Paradise. And Wrathchild is writing in saying that there's a place in Napa called Paradise. I'm going to be very honest with you. I did not know that. I mean, there's some other places around called Paradise Valley and so on, but Paradise, Paradice. Nobody says, on the trunk, there's a crosshair symbol with writing next to it, and I think it says Paradise on the trunk, and above it, Slaves is on the fin. Again, this is some esoteric Zodiac language, and it's not just the Halloween card. It's not just the interlocking Slaves in Paradise. The Zodiac talked about this all the time. When you look at the 408 cipher, when you look at the 340 cipher, when you look at how the Zodiac is just saying, I want to kill people so that I will be reborn in paradise and those whom I have killed will be my slaves. The Zodiac is saying this countless times, that that's what he is all about. Now, did he believe any of that? I don't think so. Was the Zodiac some type of delusional, borderline schizophrenic individual with these psychotic issues? I don't think so. Not for a second. Instead, I think that the Zodiac created a persona, and he was trying to act out this persona, and he is just going through the actions associated with this persona. But he was consistent with that point. Slaves in paradise. He wanted to be reborn in paradise, and those whom he had killed will be his slaves. Now, it's possible that that came from an old Filipino legend, again, myth of the Zodiac Killer. It's possible that came from the Egyptian pharaohs. I think it was Jacob. It was Jacob who contacted the show The Bible Geek and asked them to give their take on the subject about the host of the show The Bible Geek, talking about world religions. Is there any world religion that talks about being reborn in paradise and those whom you have killed will be your slaves? And the Bible Geek said, well, not exactly those whom you have killed, but the idea that the Egyptian pharaoh would be reborn in paradise with his slaves. So is the Zodiac trying to act like he's some type of pharaoh? Or maybe it came from some comic book or magazine or something that the Zodiac read back in 1941 or something like that. The Zodiac borrowed so many ideas from comic books and magazines that not only is it ridiculous, it is frustrating. It's stupid how much he did that, where it's just he's trying to act all like, I am smart, I am clever, you'll never catch me because I am too smart and clever. Yet he's stealing all of his ideas from other things, and it's even possible that he stole the entire Zodiac persona from Charlie Chan at Treasure Island, Dr. Zodiac, and in the first mention of this Dr. Zodiac who's killing people in the movie Charlie Chan at Treasure Island, he's even referred to as just Zodiac, I think. And I responded to that for an episode of the Zodiac Killer News Report, which comes out every Monday. The episodes are going to be a little bit different right now, and Zodiac Monday is going to be done again with some more interviews. As I said, I have the first one recorded, so please tune in Monday for the Zodiac Monday interview. It's going to be on camera, on video like this, and you'll see me and a guest, and I'm hoping that they're going to be more of those in the future. And if you'd like to support this channel and these true crime discussions, you can hit the like button, subscribe. It really helps everything out. And I'm going to post the links in the description box at the end of the episode, but you can also always go over to buymeacoffee.com. buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88 allows you to make a donation or a contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. Now we have another comment from BF Golf who says, hopefully they'll figure out Z had a burner phone and a Cheney avalanche. Oh, a Chevy avalanche. I'm thinking of John Cheney. It's like, what's the Cheney avalanche? A Chevy avalanche. Seems to be a good way to catch somebody. Well, yes, Chevy avalanche and burner phone. Maybe if he lived up until the 2000s, but that's another element to the Zodiac Killer mystery that becomes very frustrating and perplexing because people are all just like, they have a suspect who died in 1974 or 75 or 76 or 77, like Ross Sullivan, and then they're trying to connect the Zodiac to crimes that are going on in the 1980s, for example, the letters that were written in the 1980s and the 90s, like the Eureka card and the 2001 card. And some people are just like, no, absolutely not. All forgeries. My suspect died in 1977 and so on. So it becomes a little bit difficult to really just, who do you side with? Who do you connect things with? And BF Golf was referencing the LISK. BF Golf, I do have to challenge you a little bit. Because do we truly know the Long Island serial killer? Going off on a different subject now. Rex Heuermann was arrested for the Gilgo Beach murders, but the Gilgo Beach murders were. First, Cat Daddy Steve says, good morning, Ned. Hey, good morning, Cat Daddy Steve. The Gilgo Beach murders are the murders of the Gilgo Four: Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello. Did Rex Heuermann also commit the murders that have been attributed to the Maynardville Butcher that began as early as 1996 with the murder of Karen Vargata, who was previously known as the Fire Island Jane Doe? We don't know. Has he been charged with them? I don't think so. And I've been trying to pay attention and follow along with all of these stories and developments about the Long Island serial killer mystery. But could this actually be what people were like hypothesizing for so long, that there were two serial killers who just used the same dumping ground? That there was the Maynardville Butcher who mutilated and dismembered the bodies of the victims, and then there is the Gilgo Beach killer who strangled the victims and just dumped their bodies. At least two of them were rolled into burlap and found in the brush, the previously stated victims. And also, this raises other questions about how, Rex Heuermann has only been charged with 3 of the murders. Now, I believe that they were trying to attribute the 4th to him, but that brings up another question that I'm about to get to. What about the death of Shannon Gilbert? Was she actually killed by a serial killer? Shannon Gilbert is just smack dab in the middle of Long Island serial killer activity. She's one of the reasons why people know about the Long Island serial killer, because she's the one who made the distress phone call saying that some people are trying to get after her, multiple people, plural, and the search for Shannon Gilbert ultimately led to the discovery of the serial killer graveyard. Gilbert drowned, they say. I think so too. Or let me paraphrase. I think that she died because of the elements, and that's where I'm going to leave it at that. I've gotten into the trouble for saying that Shannon Gilbert drowned. I don't necessarily know that as a fact, so I'm going to be very clear that I think that she died as some sort of a natural reason. I believe that she was running away from somebody that wasn't actually there. She had, I don't even want to get into medical things, but she believed something that was untrue, and she was running away from somebody who wasn't actually there. It was all in her mind. And I don't know how long she spent in the marsh before she passed away. But yeah, she is found in this marshy area a long time after she disappeared. They found skeletal remains of Shannon Gilbert. But there's another issue. There's another question. If Rex Heuermann began murdering people in 2007, did he start with the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes? Or did he begin with the murder of the Cherries Jane Doe? And the Cherries Jane Doe was quite different than all of the other cases because part of her body was found in a suitcase. She was dismembered, and she did have a fruit tattoo like the Peaches Jane Doe. but part of her remains were found in a suitcase, and they're openly saying because of the waters in Long Island, it could have come from anywhere. Well, how many dismembering serial killers are out there? That's just something that I kid thee not. It never ceases to shock me. It never ceases to horrify me once we begin to notice just how many serial killers are out there and terrorizing America and the world. And also, here's something. This is something that I did an episode about back in 2020, and some people don't even like hearing this. Not all serial killers are white males. Are white males more likely to be serial killers than other people? No. You want to know why? Because in China, they have Chinese serial killers. In Africa, they have African serial killers. It's very proportionate to the population. And I did that in the episode, Are Most Serial Killers White Males? When you look at how the percentages of the population do match up rather cleanly to the number of serial killers. And I think that it just represents something that is very dark and sadistic about humanity that is relevant to people from all types of races and backgrounds. Now, I would admit that perhaps there are more serial killers who are male than there are female serial killers. And also, you tend to notice that the female serial killers resort to other tactics such as poisoning, or they resort to tactics that are done perhaps in causing somebody's death without physical contact. Maybe also even serial killers who murder children. And what does this represent? What does this represent? Back in 2019, I saw this video on YouTube, the most scholarly research effort ever, watching a video on YouTube that referenced a study that said that when men and women are in conditions where they believe that they will not receive physical harm, like no physical pushback, the victim doesn't have the opportunity to defend themselves, they are equally violent. Where women exert equal, if not more, force when they are in a situation when they believe that they will not be physically harmed. So it just goes to show that it's not even about male versus female. It's about some type of, again, a dark and sadistic side of humanity. And that's why we explore about that, because we don't have completely concrete answers. Some people believe that serial killers are driven to kill because of unhealed childhood traumas, that they have some type of either emotional or physical abuse in their childhood between the ages of 0 to 4, and then the abuse continues throughout their childhood into adolescence, and then instead of expressing themselves in a productive and constructive way, they decide to retreat and hide their inner feelings, and then they go on to unleash their destructive tendencies and behaviors in the shadows. And some serial killers are very open about it, like they aren't even necessarily trying to hide it. They just don't really care too much, and it can be kind of a different way of examining it. But we have another comment from Julian who says, "Interesting, Richard may be stationed there." Oh, he's referring to a comment that came in from Richard Grinnell saying the Japanese Iko Iki had a banner beginning "Advanced and be reborn in paradise," mimicking the 408 wording. Zodiac had a Japanese influence. Oh, was the Zodiac Killer stationed in Japan? Why not? We have multiple Japanese air bases. We have Kadena Air Base, and we have Tachikawa Air Force Base, and that was the one that Thomas Horan liked to talk about, because we had the story that he was trying to do about like Robert Graysmith possibly being a Zodiac scammer, and Robert Graysmith more or less grew up on Tachikawa Air Force Base, and he was a production assistant at a very young age working on the Tachikawa Marauder, which was a large publication at the time for the military on the Pacific front. But yeah, there are multiple Air Force bases out there, and not to mention the Navy as well, over all across, the Pacific. I mean, the Pacific fleets, right? And I was just talking about the USS Enterprise on a recent Zodiac Monday. Now, the USS Enterprise wasn't off the coast of Japan. It was off the coast of Hawaii when it had its famous fire on January 14th of 1969. And Melissa Rose Tapa, who is the webmaster of ZodiacKillerBomb.com, believes that not only was that something that the Zodiac Killer was responsible for, it's that the Zodiac Killer directly planned and created that explosion, that the Zodiac Killer intentionally started the fire on the USS Enterprise, which led to the deaths of 28 servicemen. BF Golf says, actually, a question for Richard Grinnell. Haven't heard you on Zodiac speaking lately. I also have not been keeping up with Zodiac Speaking. Zodiac Speaking is an excellent podcast about the Zodiac Killer, which is hosted by Mike Morford and Richard Grinnell. Richard Grinnell runs ZodiacCyphers.com, and Mike Morford runs ZodiacKiller.net. Morph is also on the podcast Citizen Detective, which is very well done. They did a 3-part series about the Zodiac Killer. I was a guest there on that program discussing the Phantom Killer, and they get into a lot of other true crime stories, which I am not very familiar with, but I always want to learn about those, and perhaps they can be worked into the Anything Goes Friday segment. But if you do go back and listen to any episode of the Zodiac Speaking podcast, I would recommend the interview that Mike Morford did with Joanne Getchie. Joanne Getchie was the roommate of Donna Lass, and Donna Lass went missing on September 6th of 1970. She was working the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino, and whatever happened to Donna Lass is somewhat of a mystery. In 2021, I did a regular segment every Thursday about the disappearance of Donna Lass, and for a while, the Thursday show was all about the a revolving door of possible Zodiac Killer activity, and then it turned into what was called the Versus series. And the Versus series was where I would take 2 different serial killer stories or 2 different true crime stories and compare and contrast them. And to be honest, I think that was just a little bit too different for the audience. People weren't really quite familiar with something like that, and I found that it worked so much better when I would just incorporate that into Zodiac Monday, because then I could look at not only serial killers, but I recently did one where I was talking about James Holmes, the Aurora, Colorado shooter, and that I also wanted to compare the Aurora shooter to the Zodiac, because very, very different mindsets that are going on. And Richard Grinnell says that he doubts that Zodiac Speaking will restart. Ran out of material. Oh, now come on, Richard! You didn't run out of material about the Zodiac Killer mystery. No one will ever run out of material about the Zodiac Killer mystery. Now, one thing that you might run out of, speaking from experience, or is information about the widely discussed Zodiac cases. But here's the issue, though. As I said, every serial killer from 1950 and onward gets connected to the Zodiac Killer case. Even if we go back before 1950 to 1947 with the Black Dahlia Avenger. And was the Black Dahlia Avenger even a serial killer? Some people will say no. And Steve Hodel, author of the Most Evil Books and Black Dahlia Avenger, will say, yes, the Black Dahlia Avenger was the Zodiac Killer. And then you're going to look at other people like the previously mentioned James Cameron, also individuals like David Gold, author of My Dance with the Zodiac Killer, who's just going to say that the Zodiac was actually a team of 3 people, Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, and these 3 people committed an enormous amount of crimes across the 20th century, going on and on and on and on. Now, BF Golf asks a question. I wonder if anybody has looked at Rodney Alcala as a suspect in the Donna Lass disappearance. BF Golf, were you the person who asked me about that back when I was doing the Donna Lass series? Somebody asked me to, well, just kind of what I thought about that was should Rodney Alcala be a suspect for the disappearance of Donna Lass? Rodney Alcala was a serial killer known as the Dating Game Killer because of an appearance that he made on the dating game. And the person who arrested him was actually none other than Steve Hodel, whom I was just discussing. And Steve Hodel has done a couple live streams about that, detailing his experiences with Rodney Alcala. And I mean, I'm not exactly too sure about that, because the honest answer is, again, bringing up another person, Thomas Henry Horan, he accused Rodney Alcala of committing the Sharon Tate murders, of murdering Sharon Tate. And I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole exactly because I didn't feel that it was the most beneficial. I'm going to be very clear. I believe that Sharon Tate was murdered by Tex Watson and the Manson girls, a combination of that. I don't necessarily buy into the theory that they were brainwashed by MK Ultra and all given false memories, and that Sharon Tate was actually murdered by the serial killer Rodney Alcala. So I need to do a standalone episode on Rodney Alcala first before I can fully talk about Rodney Alcala and his involvement in the disappearance of Donna Lass. And the comment that somebody asked me to look into that 2 years ago, and it was on an episode that I did where Ted Bundy was accused of committing the abduction and murder of Donna Lass because it was so much more similar to a Bundy crime rather than the Zodiac. So we have a comment that's coming to us from Cat Daddy Steve, who says, I listened to Zodiac Speaking. Mike is 100% sure William Andrew is the Zodiac. I mentioned it to Drew, and Drew totally shot down Mike's suspect. lots of disagreement among serious investigators. Okay, though, if you're referring to Drew Beeson, Cat Daddy Steve, you gotta understand, Drew Beeson also has a Zodiac suspect. He believes that the Zodiac Killer was Donald Lee Cheney with some mild involvement from Arthur Lee Allen. Of course he's gonna shoot down any other suspect. Now, Drew Beeson also appeared in the documentary The Myth of the Zodiac Killer with Thomas Henry Horan, and those guys get along, and I get along with pretty much everyone. I've done live streams with both of them, and, you know, the fact of the matter is there are disagreements in people's theories, and Morph is 100% sure that William Andrew is the Zodiac. Yes, William McDuff Andrew, who went by Mac in his daily life. I have a lot of trouble accepting that Mac was the Zodiac as well, and I've shared that on numerous episodes. And now that I'm going to be doing interviews, I will totally invite Mike Morford on the program to talk about Mac as a Zodiac Killer suspect and all of his reasons. I think that Mac is just kind of outside of all the parameters of being a serial killer, unless you entertain the idea that he just had some type of hidden dark side that nobody knew about. And that's possible. Oh, that's possible. It happens all the time. I'm always reminded of the story of Herb Baumeister, the I-70 Strangler, and even after it was found, it was discovered that he was a serial killer, his wife was like, nope, nope. But there's this enormous amount of physical evidence. He buried the bones of and scattered the bones of the victims on the property that you lived on. They're in your backyard. No, that's not the Herb Baumeister I know. And Herb Baumeister wasn't convicted of the crimes, but he committed suicide. And he actually ate a peanut butter sandwich before, and he wrote a suicide note. Didn't say anything about the murders. But one of the odd things about the case of Herb Baumeister is there might actually be some type of snuff film angle going on. And that a lot of people have these types of twisted conspiracy theories that they believe that all of the serial killers in America are connected through some type of bizarre interlocking snuff film trading circuit. But I don't subscribe to that theory, but it's possible that Herb Baumeister recorded his murders on a video camera because he committed the murders at his home, which was called Fox Hollow Farm, and that he would strangle the victims, and he would then, as I said, destroy their remains by pulverizing their bones and scattering the bones on Fox Hollow Farm. And it's actually somewhat of a hotbed of paranormal activity. Like, people come to Fox Hollow Farm even to this day for ghost hunting. So some people think that that he recorded these murders and then he destroyed the videotapes by throwing them into the Great Lakes prior to his suicide. And there's another piece of evidence that Herb Baumeister was the I-70 Strangler, right? And he might have gone on business trips and, like, trying to meet people that he would lure back to his home later on. But his wife did make another statement by saying that he always went on business trips with other people. He didn't go alone. So is there actually some type of snuff film ring or some type of serial killer club? Unlikely, but possible. And more importantly, that would go to show that even if there is somebody making these type of snuff film videotapes, it doesn't mean that it's connected to a global super conspiracy where they're doing the bidding of some type of ancient family from ancient Egypt, and they have some ancient ritual that just has to be carried on until the new millennium. And Julian writes back saying, I'm so happy that you are doing these interviews, Ned. Can't wait to watch. Well, a lot of people have been requesting it, and I'm at somewhat of a crossroads because I get to a point where I'm just so used to running my mouth nonstop for 58 minutes, as we see here, without taking a single breath, that I have things that I want to say in a very extended manner. So I'm beginning to wonder if there's going to be Zodiac Monday where I'm going to be doing the interviews, and maybe on the Tuesday it won't be about serial killers. There won't be a Serial Killer Tuesday per se, but rather just my follow-up notes in an extended episode once again. So I think that we've just got to explore some things and do test things and test trials like this one, this live stream here, because it's not very fair of me to just simply do whatever I want. I want to do things that are also going to be accepted by the audience. Now, sometimes there are going to be things where I'm just completely caught up with a true crime case and I want to talk to you guys about it. And as long as it's, somewhat relevant to the parameters of this channel, then I'd be glad to do that. Richard Grinnell asked a question, what happened to my interview of you, Ned? Richard, you let the surprise out of the bag. No, I'm sure everybody knew that, but I've done 3 interviews for the Zodiac Killer channel's Interview with the Experts series. And I was actually the second one. Richard Grinnell interviewed me because we used to do this thing called the Interview with the Experts series on the Zodiac Killer channel, and I would interview Zodiac Killer experts. And we thought it would be a nice twist if we had somebody interviewing me, and Richard Grinnell was the person who did that. I don't know, Richard. I have no control over the Zodiac Killer channel. I have no say in the creative decisions. The last I heard, there was a schedule to release these 3 interviews that we have done, and I don't know what happened with that, if it's even going to come out. But yes, Richard did a great job though as an interviewer, because Richard's been running his website for a very long time. He's also done Zodiac Speaking, and he's done a bazillion interviews himself, so he knows how to conduct things, and he can also ask very challenging questions at a certain point. And I was going to do this. Like, I had some, a whole episode in my mind. I was going to do an episode of Black Box Online Radio where I did a direct response to Richard Grinnell's interview with me, but it never came out. And I'm not really sure. It's kind of an odd decision. However, I was going to say in that response that, okay, I'm being interviewed by Richard Grinnell of ZodiacCyphers.com, and he knows so much more about the Zodiac case than I do. And was I out of my league? Absolutely, yes, in terms of these discussions, because you could really see the difference between some researcher like Richard Grinnell and some guy like me, who is just this dude in front of the camera, just talking about these true crime stories. Oh yeah, you watch a couple documentaries, you watch a little bit here and there, and yeah, Cat Daddy Steve says, Richard, your way of speaking and investigating and pure logic speaking is very impressive. Sure. And I think it comes from the fact that Richard has not only explored the Zodiac Killer mystery a lot, but ZodiacCyphers.com is really a place where people can look at countless possible connections to the Zodiac Killer mystery. And I mean, I'm over there all the time when I want to read about some possible things, whether it's the Snoozian Furlong murders or the Melina Rodriguez murders. And Richard really has, documented a lot of that. But I also had to be somewhat fair to the victims when doing Zodiac Monday, because I realized that a lot of what I was saying on the Zodiac Killer news reports was, all right, here's a new true crime story. This person was murdered. Somebody walked up and they fired some gunshots and they ran away. And that doesn't really do justice and fairness to the victims. That is what happens because, you're just sharing the smallest tidbit. Okay, somebody was murdered. Were they murdered by the Zodiac Killer? Maybe, probably not. And I can highlight the differences between this crime and a Zodiac Killer crime. But that's all about the Zodiac, where this dirtbag who murdered 5 people in 1968 and 69 becomes the focus of everything. And I did a recent poll, actually, talking about, what do you guys want to hear about with the Zodiac Killer mystery? And most people said the suspects. And I believe that it was Irish Rummy who responded by saying, it's a shame that more people don't want to hear about the victims. And it's interesting that he says that, because, as I said, I used to go on live streams with Drew Beeson and Thomas Henry Horan. And on the last one that we did, this was back when his channel was called Professor Dad, I said that the idea that I had for first a book, and then a movie, and then maybe even beyond, was to write something about the Lake Herman Road murders. And it would be about David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen in the 2 weeks prior to their murders. Nothing to do with the Zodiac at all. And part of me is saying, okay, you have to interview the families first. You got to get the narrative right. I know you want to use things from your imagination, but I mean, that's what the other thing was telling me, that as long as you're respectful and humane and you're using facts from the police reports, which you can even get in the typed version of Zodiac Killer Just the Facts, which I keep close by. And, I mean, you can even get a certain amount of clarity into their lives from that. So I was thinking, if I were to do it that way, then maybe I could write that novel, but it would be about the victims and not purely about this dirtbag who murdered 5 people, shot 2 other people, shot one other person, stabbed another person, maybe did some other things, and then just disappeared into the night, walked away on October 11th of 1969, never to be seen again. And Richard Grinnell has another comment saying, "It is a shame because some of your opinions may have changed since that interview." Referring to me? Oh my goodness, yes, Richard. We did the interview more than a year ago. I have so many things that I would just you want to be checking off. Like Richard is asking me these questions. Well, what do you think about what was the Zodiac Killer's motivation for the Lake Berryessa stabbing and why he wore the hooded costume? All of that is different now because we learn new things, especially like some guy like me who didn't know that much to begin with. I share my journey with you here on Black Box Online Radio. Absolutely. I mean, I think different things. And I mean, I can tell you all types of different things, and I've shared them on Zodiac Mondays. If you go to the playlist for the Zodiac Killer news reports, you can see the full evolution of my journeys and discussions for more or less the last year and a half about the Zodiac Killer. And maybe, just maybe, it's also my time to kind of sit back a little bit and I can let other people, share their things in their own words. Because in the past, we have always had me interpreting other people's material. Even if people were to write out statements for the show, it's always me interpreting them. Well, now they're going to be on here, and hopefully that it will succeed. But and sometimes I think it's actually been somewhat beneficial. Mike Rodelli, author of In the Shadow of Mount Diablo and the Hunt for Zodiac, has authored numerous episodes of Black Box Online Radio. He wrote the material for a Shell Cavalli episode. He wrote an episode called "Do We Have the Zodiac Killer's DNA?" Do they have the Zodiac Killer's DNA? And this provided other things for the Lyndon Lafferty book discussion that I did. Big thank you to Mike Rodelli. And Mike Rodelli and I disagree on an enormous amount of things, but we still try to get along. And that's what I was hoping Black Box Online Radio would be. Some type of intersection or central point in the true crime world, not only about the Zodiac and Jack the Ripper and the Long Island serial killer, but a central point where we can just discuss different ideas. And as somebody was saying, what was it? Lots of disagreement among serious investigators. Well, I'm even going to disagree with people. I'm just probably not going to start chewing somebody's head off or anything like that. Cat Daddy Steve is writing into the channel by saying, "Empathy for the victims is the reason I am so deeply invested in Zodiac. The killer is, / was, a far second." Sure. And I've been talking a little bit about Thomas Henry Horan, and he's the host of the Stones Unturned podcast, but he did say something. No matter if people want to be critical of him or not, he did say something once on an early episode of the Stones Unturned, and that was that the victim will tell you everything you need to know about the murder. And that might not be exactly true, but if we begin to look at true crime cases through the lens of the victim, it does reveal a lot about the killer. Think about Jack the Ripper for a second. Unlike the Zodiac, Jack the Ripper has victims that were all female. Unless you get into some far-out theory, like, say, for example, Thomas Neal Cream was Jack the Ripper, and he also committed the murder of Daniel Stott in America in 1881. Put that stuff aside, look at the confirmed victims: Polly Nichols, Nanny Chapman, and Liz Stride, and Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly. All women, all lone females. That does tell you something different about the Ripper. That is his particular choice of victim. And it's rather disputed to this day about how or whether or not the victims of the Ripper were prostitutes or not, or sex workers. For example, some people believe wholeheartedly that the Ripper only murdered prostitutes, and other people believe that none of the women were ladies of the night. They weren't sex workers at all. What happened was they were poor women who couldn't afford lodging, so they're going out on the streets and they're just kind of like doing a little bit of begging or doing a little bit of trying to just get money for gin if they can't afford the lodging house, so they can get drunk and pass out. And it was something that people did rather commonly at the time because gin was one of the cheaper alcohols. And somebody recommended a podcast to me called The Five, which is going to talk all about this theory that the Ripper victims were not actually prostitutes. It's disputed by many people. I even mentioned Randy Williams on a recent Jack the Ripper report. He's the author of the book Sherlock Holmes and the Autumn of Terror, and he talks about how that theory is just absolutely false, that these women were accosted by the police and confronted by the police for sex work and their actions. Okay, Richard Grinnell has a question. What is your opinion, Ned, on the hostility exhibited between researchers and the Zodiac community? Do you think egos have gotten out of hand? Yes. Okay, short answer to that, yes. And the extended answer would be double yes. And somebody asked me to address this back a couple of years ago, and they're like, "What is your opinion on just all of this nastiness that goes on in the comments section and on Reddit?" And my honest answer is that it has nothing to do with the true crime world. It has nothing to do with the true crime cases. It's all about personalities and gossip and name calling. And yeah, egos, but a lot of it is just trash talking. Of course, the ego would be kind of like the underlying motive, and the trash talk is what we see up here. But it has nothing to do with the mystery. Well, who was the Zodiac Killer? Well, I think this researcher is pure garbage. Um, and yes, okay, I have said that about some people, but only if I think they are genuinely fraudulent. Somebody like Gary Stewart, the author of The Most Dangerous Animal of All. Gary Stewart, you are garbage. If you somehow, some way find this, you fraud. Okay, there. Now we don't have to do that ever again. And you guys know what I think about Gary Stewart and his book, and Earl Van Best's Zodiac Killer Suspect. I've mentioned him in numerous Zodiac Killer episodes. I did a full black box recording, 8-part book discussion on Gary Stewart, the most dangerous animal of all, and Earl Van Best. And Earl Van Best was also a very unsavory individual. To this day, though, people still think that Earl Van Best was the Zodiac Killer. But what is your opinion on the hostility exhibited between researchers and the Zodiac community? A lot of people just simply want to be right. A lot of people simply want to be the one who can show that they have a better understanding of the facts. They want to be number one, and they also want to show that somebody else is dumber than they are, quite similarly to how the Zodiac Killer would say that he is smarter and more clever than people who are trying to catch them. And I just think it's human nature. It's human nature to fight, it's human nature to compete, and then we can kind of walk in the opposite direction by recognizing that a lot of those behaviors are unnecessary. Richard writes in, that's why I respect you, being a respectful and decent person. Well, thanks, Richard. I mean, you're pretty respectful and decent yourself. Although one time I think you got into somewhat of a brawl with Tom Voigt here in the comments section, but I don't even want to bring that up because that's going to be fueling the exact stuff we're trying to get away from. You know, it's sometimes it's going to happen from time to time. I've also kind of lost it on some people, whether it's here on YouTube or on Facebook. I've also, expressed a lot of negative emotion about some people, and I'm not even talking about Zodiac researchers at this point, just about people who just leave ridiculous comments about the show. Now, somebody recently asked me, they didn't ask me, this is more or less a command, keep that Zodiac knob out of the Jack the Ripper mystery. And I can't. Because there are just too many similarities. And there was a book out there that was written by Zed Simpson called Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer, and I talked about it on Zodiac Monday. And it really didn't give me what I was looking for. It was all about how, okay, here's some things about Jack the Ripper, and here are some things about the Zodiac Killer. And there's a rather similar book that's out there by Patrick Auerbach that again it's called Unsolved, about Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer. And he talks about the Ripper suspects and the Zodiac suspects. And that's not quite what I'm looking for. I still haven't found a book that talks about the evolutionary process, about how there are these similarities between Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer, and this possibility that Jack the Ripper was a forerunner to the Zodiac, and I mean a direct influence and inspiration on the Zodiac Killer. The same number of victims, the letters, the taunting of the police and other members of law enforcement. I mean, I say that lightly because one letter from Jack the Ripper was written to George LISK, who was the chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, and the Zodiac definitely taunted the police. The Zodiac made phone calls to the police, and the Zodiac calls out people all the time. If we accept that the 1978 letter was authentic, the Zodiac even calls out that city pig Dave Toschi. Says that city pig Toschi is good. But there's just so many things there where you can actually show this type of intersectional activity between Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac. And I'm tempted to write a book about that. And my family openly asked me, hey, I mean, you've been reading all these Zodiac books. You talk about the Zodiac Killer online. Are you going to write a Zodiac Killer book? Why don't you write a book about that Jack the Ripper Zodiac stuff that you've just been talking about? You want to know why? Because there's a complete chance that I could be wrong. Maybe everything that I just told you is completely wrong. It's what I genuinely think right now. But I told you I had that wild theory about the Thrill Kill Club and the Zodiac and the 5 men in the basement. I don't stand by that now. What if everything I said about the Ripper influencing the Zodiac is all false? Because there are serial killers who have a small reign of terror, a short period of activity. And there are reasons for this. And we see this with the New Orleans Axeman, we see this with the Phantom Killer, and we see this perhaps with other serial killers. I mean, sometimes people have a short reign of activity, like the Duct Tape Killer, Robert Leroy Anderson from South Dakota. Well, he was apprehended. And then we have people like the Ripper, the Axeman, the Phantom Killer, and the Zodiac, who were never apprehended. And it could be that, okay, firstly, they're just committing crimes in a certain way, and after the final crime, either they feel that their objective has been completed, they terrorize society enough, or maybe they think that they no longer need to do this for an emotional reason, or maybe they are so afraid of getting caught that they aren't going to kill again. With the Zodiac Killer, that's a widely accepted statement that after the murder of Paul Stein on October 11th of 1969, the Zodiac came so close to getting caught that he's just like, too much, I'm not going to do this again. With Jack the Ripper after the murder of Mary Kelly on November 9th of 1888, it's rather different. A lot of people believe that the Ripper had simply finished his objective. Some people think that Mary Kelly was the only target and a series of unrelated murders were committed to cover up the activity. I'm really not sure about that. But it's also that maybe Jack the Ripper was apprehended for something else. Maybe he was put into a mental institution for something else. Maybe his family confined him because they just thought that he was out of control and they tied him to a bed or something like that. These are unsolved mysteries. We have another comment from Julian, though, who says, I'm way too afraid of the backlash of trying to go public about a Zodiac Killer suspect. These experts seem extremely vicious somewhat. Well, you can definitely talk to me about this, and anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. Somebody just sent me an info statement about a new suspect whom I didn't get the name of. I want to see if I can pull that message up here. But they just asked if they could contact me. And yes, anybody can write the show, BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. Doesn't look like it's right in front of me, so I'm not going to be on my phone while I'm talking to you guys. And Julian says, not that I have one at all, just in general. Oh, okay, yes, but I will mostly give rather honest feedback about somebody's suspect. I told you one time in the past, I decided that I wasn't going to challenge somebody's story in exchange for hearing their story. Nope, never again. Not doing that. You have to challenge people's stories because it gets to a certain point then, if they don't want it challenged, well, what are they doing? Are they just playing a game? Is it just some type of wild storytelling contest? Do they even believe that their suspect actually was the Zodiac? And I think the people who don't want any challenges at all don't actually believe it. I think that they know on a deep spiritual level, that their suspect wasn't the Zodiac. They're just having fun telling the story and looking at these observations. Look at all these mental connections that I have made. Look at all of these ways that I've rearranged numbers to get a desired result. Look at all of these ways in which I have found that the third word in every sentence is something that can reveal my suspect's initials. They know that stuff isn't true. They're just kind of, again, playing a game the same way that somebody's writing a creative story, like creative writing class back in high school or the university, and then someone's like, well, hey, this doesn't quite make sense. No, this is my story, and I want to tell it the way I want. That's what I think is happening with these people who don't want challenges about their Zodiac suspects or the Jack the Ripper suspects. They have just kind of reached a level of emotional satisfaction, and they don't want to go beyond that because it's going to be very unpleasant when they learn that they're wrong. But a lot of people do this. And there are people out there who are true crime researchers. And to get into a different subject, which I haven't covered yet in this live stream, it relates to the O.J. Simpson case. And I am shocked at the amount of people who are following the OJ Truther movement. And I did this back in 2019. I would, respond to all types of OJ Truther claims back when I was doing the literal black box online radio where there was just a black box on the screen. I did countless OJ Truther theories. And I've noticed that those episodes can catch on sometimes even faster than the Zodiac Killer episodes. And there was an episode, well, it's actually a 6-part miniseries that was produced by Martin Sheen, where William C. Deere had the opportunity to present his alternative theory in the O.J. Simpson case. And William C. Deere used to have the book out, O.J. is Guilty but Not of Murder, and he changed the title of it for a newer edition to O.J. is Guilty and I Can Prove It. And it's all about this alternative theory that O.J. Simpson didn't actually commit the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. They were committed by his son, Jason Simpson, his oldest child. Jason Simpson was from a previous marriage. And what happened was that, and we have Cypress Phil who says, "Hi, chat. Hi, Ned. Hey, Cypress Phil. How you doing?" And what happened is William C. Deere put his theory to the test through a full examination, with the members of law enforcement, like not on duty, but like they're for the show. And you can just see a very solid debunking of a true crime theory. And he's just kind of just completely overwhelmed with emotion in the final episode when they're showing him all these reasons why his theory is incorrect. And I mean, I really kind of accepted the result that Jason Simpson did not commit the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, but it's hardly affected anybody on the internet. I even got a request earlier this year about, hey, would you like to bring William C. Deere on for a live stream? Well, sure. I mean, I would definitely talk to him about his stuff if he still stands by his O.J. Simpson claims that Jason Simpson was the actual perpetrator. But William C. Deere has also written other books, and I would love to discuss his book, The Dungeon Master, which is written about the disappearance of a teenage genius. I would think that we could have a very kind of striking true crime discussion about that. And I also want to ask you guys, because this is a test run, this is a trial run. Do you hear any of the background noises? I mean, because the Philippines is kind of going wild right now. Imagine every sort of unpleasant noise possible. Do you guys hear that on your end? Or is this just kind of like all in my head? Is it just kind of like bang the drum slowly going on in my mind? And if anybody wants to respond to the chat, that would be greatly appreciated. Richard says no, and Cypress Phil says no, sounds great to me. I mean, I did put some efforts in place to try and block out all of the background noises so you guys don't hear chickens and barking dogs and everything. Wrathchild, I don't hear any background noise. Cat Daddy Steve, your audio is clean. I made it all the way to America and the United Kingdom and beyond with clean audio. Believe it or not, I actually used to record a lot of those O.J. Simpson episodes live. And it was, back in a time when I lived right next to my internet router. I live next to my internet router. Who doesn't? No, my recording place was right next to the internet router. Yet still, that came out horribly. And it would kind of like turn into the okay, and then you were just absolutely inaudible. And part of me just looks back on life and was like, what on earth was I doing at that time? But the other part of me recognizes that you do learn things in the past. And I wanted to talk more about this when I did an interview with Stuart McAdam, who runs a very good channel about internet promotions. And Stuart McAdam was talking all about how that, how did I kind of evolve Black Box Online Radio? How did the channel evolve? And I finally was able to put it into words. And it was, okay, Richard Grinnell says you can always play a tune on your guitar and drown out the noise. Maybe at some point I'll play for you guys one day. But Black Box Online Radio began to evolve because I heard this video from a motivational speaker named Owen Cook who said, some people focus on the process, some people focus on the result, but what you need to do is focus both on the process and the result. And what I was doing in the past with just the black box on the screen, that was only focusing on the process. Like, I'm not focusing on the end result. Like, what am I creating? I'm just going through the motions of creating something. And I realized at a certain point that that was just unacceptable. And I'm not actually creating quality content. A-Train is here and says, Ned, you should do an episode on the disappearance of Charlie Allen Jr. Pretty interesting case. I will add that to the list of possible topics, A-Train. I'm not familiar with that one, so I can't give a comment on that. If you want to share anything in the live chat, feel free to do so. But as far as these types of evolutions for the channel. I had this idea in 2017, just have a black box on the screen and call it Black Box Online Radio. So many channels do that, right? Right? Well, they do that when they have an established following. Because back in 2014, I used to listen to Howard Stern day in and day out. Not really on Sirius XM, but on YouTube. Firstly, big thank you to Banana Christmas Tree, who uploaded all of these Howard Stern clips, and I believe that channel is no longer up there. But the episodes, that I would listen to, sometimes even more than once, and there were a lot of them that were just on a black box. There was a black box, and you're going to hear Howard Stern talking, and Robin Quivers, and of course other people like Baba Booey. And I was like, other people do it, right? Guess what? When you make your first YouTube video and nobody knows who you are not Howard Stern. You are not the king of all media. You don't have an established following the way that he did. So famous channels can get away with that. And also, people who are doing the podcasts on the podcast circuit, it's expected that there are not going to be visuals. Whereas something on YouTube, people do expect visuals. And in 2020, I started adding in the graphics. Like you would see Black Box Online Radio, and there would be something that says more content in the description box, please listen. And there would be sparks in the background. And that went on for a while. And believe it or not, that's me. That's me. It's taken me 6 years to do a live stream on the video. Can we just do this type of video live stream? 6 years to actually do one that seems to have clean audio. My goodness. And the reason why is because I've always been more of a radio person, geared toward focusing on the ideas, focusing on the stories, focusing on the way that my voice sounds, and not really on the visuals. Richard Grinnell says, now approaching 3,000 subscribers. Has this exceeded or fell short of your expectations, Ned? Firstly, I have to also give a shout out to Classic Chevy Cat, who is about to point that out, that Black Box Online Radio almost has 3,000 subscribers, and was asking me if I was going to do a celebration. I'm kind of 50-50 on that. I mean, I would much rather just do a holiday celebration with you guys. Maybe we'll celebrate Halloween again here on this channel, and, just try and do it as well as I can, Philippine style. Odd fact, Halloween is barely a thing here. In September in the Philippines, I didn't know this until this year. In September in the Philippines, Christmas comes up. I'm walking through the shopping mall, dashing through the snow. I'm like, no, not until November 1st. We need to be hearing spooky horror sounds all through October. Now, has this exceeded or fell short of your expectations? Two-part answer, Richard. Number one, oh, absolutely, this has exceeded my expectations. Anybody is listening to Black Box Online Radio at all? Pat myself on the back. More honest answer, absolutely fell short of my expectations, because at a certain point, you just kind of want to go for the gold. And I know I'm perhaps not saying this in the most kind of like down-to-earth tone, but you do that. You want to try and just get more and more and more until you become somebody like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, and then you just go absolutely insane or something like that. Jeff Bezos had a big wake-up call, losing $36 billion in the divorce. We'll save that for the roast on Comedy Central. But as far as expectations, yeah, fell short. Of course I want to do more for the channel. Of course I want the channel to be bigger. And, it's a work in progress, because I was only focusing on the process and not the result. No one to blame but me, though, for falling short of my expectations. And I think a lot of it is because my brand of true crime really is not for everyone. My brand of true crime, where it's like, deep dives into only a few stories, the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, and a lot of the Anything Goes Friday segments, just really aren't that popular among wide ranges of audience, because normally I work a lot of hours. Last year, I was working 80 hours a week. I had 2 jobs, and I was doing the show. And I was even trying to also record for the Zodiac Killer channel's podcast, Serial Killer C to A. And one time I just had to stop. Like, I was so tired. I was reading the script. And then Robert Graysmith wrote a book. And what? You could actually hear me falling asleep on the recording. And no, they didn't put that out there, because Steve, who runs that channel, is actually very good with the sound editing. But it became a real challenge, And so it was the Anything Goes Friday episodes, they were just about whatever true crime book I was reading. I don't even think I was watching true crime videos at that point, but I did read a lot of books, and I was actually following along. Oh, Cat Daddy Steve says 80 hours and BBOR. Yeah, it sucked. I mean, working 80 hours a week sucked. BBOR has never sucked. I love doing the show. But when I was working 80 hours a week, I would just get a bunch of headaches. Some nights, you sleep 4 hours and you wake up. I mean, you go to bed at 4 a.m., you wake up at, no, actually, I would go to bed at 2 a.m., wake up at 6 a.m. because I had to start work at 8 a.m. And yeah, that sucked, because it's just walking down the street on your way, you get headaches, walk into Dunkin' Donuts, eat some avocado toast because you hate donuts for no reason, and of course, coffee. Oh, yes. Did you ever hear this thing, though? If you work more and you earn more money, your life doesn't change because you are who you are and you spend more money. And I spent all my money on Dunkin' Donuts, not eating the donuts, eating avocado toast and corn muffins, energy drinks to make it through the day, and stuff like that. 80 hours is madness, dude. Yeah, it was. And earlier this year, though, I was working about 60 hours a week at one job, and that was rather doable and to keep up with Black Box Online Radio. It's just there were some other challenges to the show, like I didn't have the best recording location, even in America, and some people complained about the audio quality, which is really why I'm trying to test this out now and just to see how this is going to work out. And Richard Grinnell says, would your ambition to be make a living from true crime full time? My honest answer to that, Richard, is because I do the show with different segments, Zodiac Monday, Ripper Wednesday, and the Anything Goes Friday segment, I would like the Anything Goes Friday segment to evolve into something a little bit beyond the true crime world. And I have other days in the week. And I have, a Tuesday and a Wednesday, a Tuesday and a Thursday show that could also be devoted to true crime, Serial Killer Tuesday, or maybe even just like my follow-up from the interviews on Tuesday. And then I could do an episode about serial killers every Thursday. And for the Friday show, expand into historical mysteries. Like Richard, you just talked about the Mary Celeste, and I was talking about the Orang Medan, and I mean, there are lots of other historical mysteries out there, even some types of secrets of the pyramids, the Curse of Oak Island. I mean, there are so many things that are available to be discussed. So those wouldn't even be in the true crime world. I mean, make a living from YouTube. I guess everybody sort of wants that. I'm fully aware after doing this for 6 years and only getting 3,000 subscribers, whereas some people do their channel for 6 months and they get 100,000 subscribers. You want to know why? Political trash talk, but that's just not me. And I gave up my political affiliations a long time ago, and I just decided that I was going to explore humanity as opposed to simply trying to phrase words in a certain way to gain more power. But Cat Daddy Steve says 80 hours of blue-collar physical work or white-collar desk work. 40 hours blue-collar work, 40 hours desk work. I was a front desk person, and it was rather doable, but still. They would note that my performance would get a little bit wacky. Oh, hey, you forgot to organize this thing, you forgot to organize these files on the computer in a certain way. You forgot to type this on the line, and your performance does get affected like that. So half and half. But yeah, the 40 hours of blue collar work, believe it or not, that allows you to wake up a bit because you can't slow down. When you have physical tasks that you just have to do them, and you try your best. And well, it's Black Box Online Radio became extremely organized at the time because this is just kind of who I am. I like to work a lot. Like even back in 2015 when I wasn't running the YouTube channel, I realized that I would work so much. I would have like Wednesday nights and Friday nights free. And I was like, I have to do something. I have to do something. I have to let somebody just give me a couple more hours for Wednesday nights so I can fill in that gap. And I started actually going to Chinese class because in 2015 I was living in China. Some of you guys know that. 北京欢迎你，为你开天闢地. And I would go that, so I would do my Chinese homework then. And I don't really speak Chinese. I said this once on a live stream that I did with Drew Beast, and he asked me about it. And I was like, out of the group of people that I interacted with, my Chinese level was the absolute worst. Yes, and that's pretty much it. And we have a comment from Cypressville who says the Zodiac case is fairly niche. Oh, the Zodiac case is fairly niche. Why? But true crime is huge. Oh, yeah, totally. But you know what thing that I learned about this is the people who follow the Zodiac Killer mystery, which is most of you guys in the comment section, people almost are insatiable about it. Like they just always want to hear different sides of the story and different aspects of the Zodiac Killer mystery within reason. For example, when I did the episode on the guy who thought that Bernie Sanders was part of a plot to organize the Zodiac Killer murders, now he genuinely does believe in his theory. His page is called Zodiac Ciphers Solved, and his name is James Simpson. A lot of you guys were just like, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear it. And I was talking about this in a recent episode of Black Box Online Radio where I was saying that I just noticed that you guys in the comments section don't really want to hear about the wild and ridiculous theories. So there's this kind of popular conception out there that, oh yeah, these people are just making up ridiculous stories to get attention. Well, if you make up ridiculous true crime stories to get attention, most people are just going to look at that and be like, nope, not true. So maybe somebody like Alex Jones would start bringing in the screaming and talking about, I don't like them putting chemicals in the water to make a freaking frog escape. And he would incorporate that type of element into his show, and it gets your attention. But also, Alex Jones had something that was a little bit different than a lot of the other broadcasters, and it's what Marvelous Work in a Wonder called being a man from Joe's Bar and Grill, where he didn't present himself as an academic. He presented himself as an ordinary human being who likes to shout a lot, and just this ordinary guy who figured things out. Again, he's not a professor, he doesn't have a PhD. He's just presenting himself as somebody who was trying to know the truth, and he could be the ordinary man from Joe's Bar and Grill, and he's still talking about things like, definitely, he had a high understanding of the material, but Alex Jones was a terrible debater. That's why when he went on Piers Morgan to talk about guns, he just shouted the whole time, because if you watch him actually debate people, he's not very good at it. And we have a couple of comments that have come in now. One of them is from Cypress Phil, who says, that's why BBOR is great for us. So much Zodiac content all the time. Hey guys, trying here, and also going to be talking about Jack the Ripper, the Long Island serial killer, and the Gilgo Beach trial, and a bunch of other true crime cases. Cat Daddy Steve says, I want the Zodiac solved by DNA and into the next case, just like Joe D'Angelo. We would all love that. If there was some way, somehow, the opportunity to have a Golden State Killer ending with the Zodiac case where they're like, all right, DNA, multiple crime scenes, hands down, this is the guy. But Richard Grinnell, you know the stuff better than anyone. Do they have the Zodiac Killer's DNA? Because everything that I have encountered over the last 14 months is telling me, no, I don't really think that we in the general public have the ability to say that we have the Zodiac Killer's DNA. Oh, I'm sure members of law enforcement know the answer. I'm talking about us here in, who are on Black Box Online Radio in this chat right now. I'm talking about us who just follow the case through a media-type lens. I don't believe that they have the Zodiac Killer's DNA. Richard Grinnell writes, and yet Ned's videos on the Zodiac Killer routinely get the most views. And Cypressville says that Alex Jones impression. Yeah, Alex Jones is actually a very good voice actor. Like when he would do characters on his show, and like his co-hosts and such, like Millennial Millie and Owen Schroyer, would give him voice work challenges, and he could actually do them pretty well, which is so odd because Alex Jones just had that horrible speaking voice, and I couldn't believe it when I first heard him back in 2011, and as I was like, dude, out of all the things in the world, you're a radio host? And, he just had that very broken voice, and he openly said by his own admission his voice was damaged from shouting at political rallies. Now, 1 minute ago, I said that I didn't want to be in the political world. Oh, trust me, I want to go to a political rally and just start shouting. It doesn't even matter what we're talking about. Universal health care, more guns, Second Amendment, quasi-libertarian eco-feminists who think testosterone is destroying the world. I just want to do the shouting. Can I be very honest with you? Totally facetious. Totally. I'm just messing with you guys. I would never actually do that. Hey, River Prawn Pottery is here. Is there anyone you'd love to interview about the Zodiac that's alive? How do you mean, like a researcher, or do you mean a suspect? Suspects, of course. I would love to interview suspects, and I tried to get in contact with Michael O'Hare, who's the subject of the book Time 17, as well as Zodiac Killer Solved by Ray Grant. Time 17 is by Gareth Penn, and Michael O'Hare just didn't want to talk about it, and he doesn't have to. He's dealt with this stuff for 35 years or whatever it's been. But yeah, I'd love to interview him because he seems very aware of everything. And as far as researchers, bring them on. Anybody. 95% anybody. 5%. Even I have limits when it comes to open-mindedness. As I said, it's mostly down to, number one, is somebody being fraudulent? I don't want to talk to them. Is their content too bizarre or too weird that even I don't understand it, or I think that it's just so completely wrong? Let's say, for example, the Zodiac Killer faked the moon landing. That's not a real theory, but if it were, no, I wouldn't bring you on the show. It's just too weird. Number three, if they were just extremely rude and I thought they had no credibility and they're still being rude, no, stuff like that, I wouldn't bring people on. Richard Grinnell says, I believe that we have Zodiac DNA on the 1978 envelope, but if people don't think the 1978 letter is genuine, it's a moot point. Yes, Richard, absolutely. You are going to be dealing with an uphill battle with something like that if you're going to try and say that the 1978 letter has DNA, because not everybody is in consensus that that letter is authentic. And Cat Daddy Steve says, touch DNA, today's DNA tech. Wow, I don't read so good. Damn West Virginia education. Today's DNA tech can now extract a profile from a single old cell. So looking good if people want to solve the Zodiac if the police cooperate. Hey, Cat Daddy Steve, I hope so. I really hope so. I really hope that that could be an answer to everything, that would actually show us some answers. Julian says, ha ha ha, love the Alex Jones impression. Just grab my coffee. Hey, come on in. Sit down, Julian. And, the problem with Alex Jones was just that he reached a certain point where he was no longer talking about conspiracy theories, and he was talking about a little bit about conspiracy theories intertwined with just mainstream political rhetoric. And, he was so similar to some of these ordinary commentators on AM radio. And I think that a lot of us, even me, the reason why we listened to Alex Jones was because he was different, because he's actually talking about conspiracy theories and presenting them in a way, making it sound like he genuinely believes them. But Alex Jones was so annoying when he was trying to sell products like super male vitality, liquid and pills, water filters, hats that are saying make frogs straight again. So annoying. Bought. River Prawn Pottery says bought. No, I didn't buy the super male vitality pills, if that's what you mean. Oh, and Cypress Phil says, we know the 5% of people who are just too crazy or too weird or too rude or just too unfriendly to bring on. And River Pond Pottery asked, is Tom Voigt in that category? No, I would interview Tom Voigt. I would like to bring him on the channel and talk about the Zodiac Killer. And Tom Voigt runs the only Zodiac Killer website that is connected to law enforcement. I wouldn't put him in that category. I meant more about the people who can't differentiate between fantasy and reality, or if they just feel like they're entitled in some way to control the direction of the show. You're like, hey, Ned Dehan, I know you don't know me, but this is what we're going to do. You're going to do this type of interview with me. You're going to ask me these questions, and then I'm going to say this. And it's like, I've dealt with a couple of those people. Like, I don't know who you are. My audience doesn't know who you are. You've just pulled up a Zodiac Killer suspect out of the blue. If you want me to evaluate your findings, you can write out a statement and I will evaluate that, but you're not just going to take over the show and just turn it into your own platform. Go start your own YouTube channel and do it there. And Wrathchild says, as far as we know, there is no two matching fingerprints, correct? Earlier this year on the channel, there was a video that was made available on the Zodiac Killer official YouTube channel that said that the fingerprints in the Zodiac Killer case might not actually belong to the Zodiac Killer, and that they could belong to Lindsay Robbins, who was one of the witnesses that provided the details for the composite sketch, the famous composite sketch after the Stein murder. Now, here's another example. We heard that story, but it's a possibility. It's a possibility. Did Lindsay Robbins actually leave those fingerprints? I'm 50-50. I am not accepting that those are Lindsay Robbins' prints 100%. And if we do have DNA evidence, I think that would definitely trump these fingerprint evidence, or they would just go on the back burner until then. Now, Cat Daddy Steve says, Richard, that begs the question of Who says a Zodiac letter is official? Who is the authority, or what is the real Zodiac? Well, Cat Daddy Steve, I know this isn't the answer that you want, but I was hoping that Black Box Online Radio could do this in the future for a Zodiac Monday episode. Divide everything into just kind of a category. Really try to organize things. What are the authentic letters? My observations, your observations. Can we all say that the July 31st, 1969 letters are authentic? The August 4th letter, the letters that contain the pieces of Paul Stein's bloody shirt, the Z13, the Z32, can we all say that those are authentic? And there are more. The Halloween card is widely accepted as authentic. There are lots of them. But of course, Richard Grinnell is somebody who thinks that there are a lot more authentic letters than the average zodiologist. Now, I do have to provide the statement once again. We are not 100% certain that the 1978 letter is authentic. There's a high chance that it is, but Richard Grinnell uses quite a different method than law enforcement. Law enforcement's going to look at DNA fingerprints and the side palm print, the writer's palm, because when someone is writing a letter, their palm is going to be pressed against the paper. And they were able to extract that from the 1974 Exorcist letter. But here's something now. Not everyone is in agreement that the 1974 Exorcist letter is authentic. People even have their doubts. And Richard Grinnell says handwriting is subjective, not objective. Absolutely, absolutely. We have Sherwood Morrill authenticating the Bates had to die letters in the Sherry Joe Bates case. The ones that said Bates had to die, there will be more, she had to die, there will be more, that were mailed in the spring of 1967. I side with the story that those were a hoax or a prank. I might get some pushback, I might get some disagreement, but in my deepest conviction, I side with the story that those were a prank. And Hot Rock Nation says, rock on. Hey, Ricky Hot Rock, thank you so much. BF Golf. I don't believe handwriting analysis can be trusted 100% exact methods. No, it can't, because some people are good at forgeries. Have you ever heard the story of Mark Hoffman? Not Richard Hoffman, but Mark Hoffman, the guy that became so good at fabricating documents and coins that he could even fool the experts. He's the subject of the documentary Murder in the Mormon Church. It was a 3-part documentary series that was available on Netflix. People can fool the experts. Some people are incredibly good at forgery. And did you ever think about this when you were like watching true crime videos and TV shows growing up and even in your adulthood? Well, the handwriting expert authenticated it. It's a forgery, or a forgery is designed to look like the original. And I'm always just like, what if somebody was just really good at forging someone else's handwriting? And I've already talked about the myth of the Zodiac Killer enough on this live stream, but that was a theory that was discussed by Thomas Henry Horan in his book, as well as in several places on YouTube, that could somebody have looked at the handwriting that was published in the newspaper, as well as the Zodiac symbol, and practiced their handwriting for 5 to 6 weeks prior to the Lake Berryessa stabbing, and that's why it looks so similar on the car door? Maybe. Is that why the Zodiac Killer didn't take more credit for it? By saying, I did in those kids in the North Bay area. And that's all he says about Lake Berryessa? Maybe. Or there could just be a simpler explanation that that was the Zodiac Killer, and that Zodiac Killer doesn't have to take credit for crimes the same way every time. He had already proven to everyone's satisfaction that he had committed the crime, so there was very little else for him to say. So, it really comes down to kind of a very subjective thing. What did Richard say? Subjective, not objective, or science. Totally. And also, what about credibility here? What if we look at somebody like Michael Woxel, author of The End of the Zodiac Killer Mystery? Well, the end of Michael Woxel's career, perhaps. Michael Woxel is getting up all there saying he's a handwriting expert, and then teams up with Gary Stewart and Susan Mustafa, and this whole fraudulent, for-profit book scheme involving the most dangerous animal of all, and The End of the Zodiac Killer Mystery. By Michael Woxel's own admission, they go hand in hand. It definitely seems like some publishing company was trying to squeeze as much money as they could out of us. And I read the book, The Most Dangerous Animal of All. I did an 8-part book discussion on it, and that is one of the few Zodiac Killer books out there where I openly say, please do not buy it. You can listen to my episodes. Not trying to promote them or anything. I'm not going to get any real money from that. No. You can watch the FX Hulu documentary series on Gary Stewart. You don't need to read that book. It's, I think, a genuine example of blatant fraudulent behavior of someone who genuinely lied to put out a publication. Parts of it are true. I think parts of it are the stuff about Earl Van Bust and his life story. I think a lot of those are true on the part of Gary Stewart trying to make a biography on his biological father, who was indeed a real criminal. And I think a lot of it is false, and it's very saddening. So, right now, I would just like to say a big thank you to everyone who has been following along with this live stream, and there are going to be some more of this in the future. And I still have one final question for everybody is, do you like starting your day with some true crime talk radio? Now, if I were to do this 5 days a week like I had originally planned, they wouldn't all be about the Zodiac Killer, of course. As I said, there would be one episode devoted about serial killers, one about Jack the Ripper, and the Anything Goes Friday segment could deal with historical mysteries, but also, I'm even tempted to go into some other types of subjects. Anything Goes Friday stuff, right? So you can talk about conspiracy theories. You can talk just about some of the current events that are going on. And that would also just be something where I would really want to stay focused on a particular subject, because as you see in this episode, I can talk about anything I want. This is talking about true crime, and we go Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper a lot. And we have some responses. Cat Daddy Steve, yes, thumbs up. Wrathchild, yes to True Crime Talk Radio. River Prawn Pottery. Ned, you may have already mentioned this. Is this the new time when you Lapland on... What do you mean, when do I plan on doing live streams? This is when you Lapland on live streams. It was my original time. I wanted to start the live streams at 7 p.m. I really didn't know if that was the best. I was going to call it True Crime Talk Radio in the morning. I can do a better radio voice than that. True Crime Talk Radio in the morning with Ned Dehan. And then I thought maybe I'll push it later at night to something, maybe start even at midnight, do it for the afternoon. So I'm going to be we have one from Cat Daddy Steve. Post your live chats ahead of time. Yeah, sure, I can do that, like posting like a preview for it, the way a lot of other people do. Wrathchild, I really enjoy these streams. It feels a little more personal. Sure. These would definitely be very interactive. And the interviews that I'm going to be doing are going to be pre-recorded. So I think that that's just purely dealing with people's schedules. People have jobs, and they have only certain times when they can record. So not everyone would even be available at 7 a.m. People on the West Coast are still going to be sleeping. So... And this is going to be the first one, so thank you so much for everybody who has listened to this episode, and I will be back again very soon for more True Crime Talk Radio in the morning. But until then, we can always say, oh, wait, Mystery Junkie, you just got here. I got to hang out with Mystery Junkie for a little bit. Mystery Junkie is a longtime follower of this program. Who are you interviewing? Anybody who's willing to come on. I mean, I'm going to be sending out some messages next week, arranging all of the people for future Zodiac Monday episodes, and I'm going to be sharing some stuff with you guys about some new suspects, because there's some people who are on the list of possible interviewees whom I've never discussed before on the channel. So this whole thing about running out of material, here, can I give you guys a final send-off? I have not even scratched the surface with the Zodiac Killer mystery. I have not even gone to any limit. Because, firstly, what did I say about the police reports, right? I read them, I read this 2 years ago, did a 4-part book discussion. I can go back again and give kind of an updated set of observations. But also, I haven't read Marianne Corfer's book in the entirety. The one that I was talking about, Zodiac Crack. I haven't read Michael Benson's book. I haven't read Patrick Auerbach's book in the entirety. I haven't read Harriet Sucker's book. I haven't read Tim Spencer's book. There are just so many people that I haven't explored yet. And not to mention, there are other suspects out there. And I incorporated some of them into the Zodiac Killer suspect ratings. But to answer Mystery Junkie's question, I'm going to be making just an entire list of possible interviewees. I'm going to be trying to schedule them for times. And also, as I said, this channel won't be limited only to the Zodiac Killer. I'm also going to be talking to people about different true crime subjects and maybe even some other things for the Anything Goes Friday segment. But Julian, take care as well. All right, everybody, you guys have a wonderful day, afternoon. What did Truman Burbank like to say? In case I don't see you again, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Something like that. But I normally sign off Zodiac Monday by saying, goodbye. But for a Thursday episode, I'll just say until next time. All right, well, guys, thank you so much for all of this. And yeah, Daddy Steve, you're welcome. Until next time.